All right,
This meeting is
hello.
being recorded.
Whoa, okay, we got that announcement. We all know it's being recorded. Uh, welcome back to the GGGKR, the great Guy Gavriel K. Reed. We are talking today about The Wandering Fire. That is book two of the Fionavar tapestry. And I must say that I am absolutely delighted to be joined here by my two friends, P.L. Stewart, author of the Drowned Kingdom Saga. Hello, P.L. How are you?
Hello, how are you, Philip? So on to be back with you and Evan to talk about this wonderful series.
Excellent. And Evan, it is great to see you again, my friend. Evan is the genius behind the channel, The Nerd Writer, and yeah, I'm actually dying to hear what you think of this one today, Evan. But
That's very kind of you, first of all. Second of all, I'm so happy to be back for the GGGKR. Some are calling it, I've noticed, the literary event of the year, even the decade,
or the
and
century,
I
maybe.
or the century. I don't know that I can argue with that, but we are now into 2026, and GGK is going to thread right through this year for you and I, Philip. And
Yep.
I'm so excited for that, and I'm so excited to have PL here for the Fionavar Tapestry.
Awesome. Me too. And just so a heads up, we have now a pretty full slate of guests for all of the future books that we're doing. I have put up a an announcement, a post on my channel about the rough reading schedule. We're gonna try to do one a month. Evan and I are gonna do one a month. We'll be joined by various guests. We're so fortunate to be joined by PL for the Fiona of Our Tapestry. But if we fall behind, I'll let people know. You know, life happens, so it's a rough schedule. Just keep that in mind. But we're gonna try to do one a month, and we're doing them in publication order, with the exception of Tigana, which we did first, which is what basically
And please,
connects us.
if you're out there and want to read along, please do. We'd
Yes,
love to have you join us.
exactly, exactly. I'm putting it out there on my various social media. My vast hordes of followers now know that
The
that
Chasers,
the
the Chasers.
Chasers, yes. Okay.
Oh, the Chasers. That's awesome. The
That's pretty
Chasers.
good
I
for
love it.
spur of the moment
I
there.
love it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why the man has 2 point whatever million followers. He can come up
Oh,
with stuff like
please, please.
So, all right. Well, we are going to do non-spoiler first, as is our tradition. Shouldn't take us too long. This is book two, but I do think we're going to have. I personally am very excited, even for the non-spoiler stuff, to talk about this. And then when we get to the spoiler stuff, though, we will wave our arms and warn you. But first, non-spoiler assessment. PL, what are you thinking about The Wandering Fire? How would you compare it to The Summer Tree?
Thank you so much, Philip. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was, for me, certainly, and as amazing as the Summer Tree was, it was a significant step up for me.
Hmm.
Of course, I'm coming in with the knowledge of having read a lot more GGK, a lot of his future works, and comparing, contrasting. I just think that this had so much of what I love. I absolutely love a neuro book fantasy. This was such a dynamic book. Of course, I've read ahead and I've read the third one and I know what's coming. And I'm trying not to make that influence how much I love this, but I absolutely loved it. The themes here, and of course, we'll delve into them, but I just want to highlight in a non spoilery way the theme of sacrifice, I think, really hit home in this book. And of course, I also have to comment on the lore that is incorporated in this book, which I'm sure we'll delve into. That I was trying to cagily hint at for those of you who hadn't read it yet, what you were in for. I think Evan had mentioned he'd heard a bit what might be coming, but now you've seen it, so you have a better idea of the kind of things you're going to experience for the rest of the series. It's fantastic, and I also, my final comment. This is where GGK's prose really sparkled. It
Mm.
really, you can see the difference between one and two. I mean, he brought some there are moments of his A game, that GGK A game, prose wise in the second book.
All right. Well said, PL. So, Evan, you of the three of us last time, I think it's fair to say, had the most issues with the Summer Tree. Although I will confess that I did agree with several of your points that you made last time. So, how are you feeling, non-spoiler, about book two? Did it address some of
Well,
those points for you?
I didn't want to play that role of the person who liked it least, but I mean that's the card I was dealt. I have to be honest. But I'm happy to report that I enjoyed the Wandering Fire quite a bit more
Okay.
than the Summer Tree. And I think a large part of that is down to the fact that I know the characters now. And even though I still feel that some of them were thinly drawn, a bit thinly drawn, having that foundation in this book allowed me to buy into what I think Kay is trying to accomplish here. And the characterization does deepen in this book. The thematic goals, the big themes here, for me at least, became much more vivid in this book. And as I've come to expect from Kay, they are ambitious, meaty, ambitious themes. Um, I love that ambition. I love it, even if the execution sometimes falls short. But here, there are some, I think, really great scenes. There are places here where the prose, which already evident in the Summer Tree, is very good, is wedded to the characters, the narrative, and the themes. And that's really what I'm looking for because big ideas and big themes for me, um, they're never more effective than when they emerge organically from an immersive story. And that is what you get here at times. On the question of immersion or buy-in, mileage I think is going to vary among readers, and I think it does. For me, the mileage varied within the Wandering Fire, but I liked it more than the Summer Tree, less than Tigana, but frankly, that's the progression that I expected to see. And I'm glad that we're moving in that direction. I know what he's capable of, and it's a joy just to see him, work and see his beginnings.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, it is really something. I have to say that, of course, I was did plenty of gushing in the previous discussion about the summer tree, and for me, this hit even harder and better. And something became even clearer to me in the course of reading The Wandering Fire, which is how much Kay is really leaning into archetypes. There are certain characters that are clearly called out as being a representation of an archetype. And this is something that he did certainly in the Summer Tree, for sure. I mean, Paul's journey comes to mind. But for me, it became even more vivid, even more clear in here as he expanded even the kinds of mythology that he's leaning on. Last time, the Celtic stuff was all over the place. There was some obvious Norse stuff, Arthurian legend. There's some very Tolkienian echoes in there as well. This time, he went to Greek mythology in a way that I loved. The story of Adonis being just an archetype that he uses and incorporates into this, and the conceit of Fionavar being the world, the primary world on which other worlds are based or are echoes of, let's say. That actually works really well to me for this experimentation in archetypes, which is what he's doing. And I feel like I'm getting it even more now in the Wandering Fire than I was in the Summer Tree. And so I'm fully invested, uh, bathing in the prose. I'm loving, and there are some very, you know, very human, very moving moments in here as well. That I think K does just that's just signature K. I think is he really does get you to feel for those characters. And yeah, I'm very very optimistic that this is going to be an incredible journey. If this is his earliest stuff and I'm already this excited, wow, where's it going to
Sky's the
go?
limit.
You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really happy. So those are our non-spoilers thoughts, and now what we're going to do is we're going to have Evan actually. You can always tell Evan has revealed this already, but you can always tell how much Evan likes a book by how many slides.
I can't help it. I can't help it.
By how
I
many
love visual
slides
aids. I'm a visual person.
Man, by the time we get to, the final books, we're gonna have like just slides the whole time. That's all we're gonna have.
It's gonna be a slide-a-thon. It's gonna be a slide-a-thon.
Slide-a-thon, a convergence of slides. But yeah, Evan has some wonderful, done some research. PL and I both have backgrounds as medievalists, so we're excited to hear, Evan, what you are going to talk about in terms of your research into. I hear you looked up a few Arthurian stories. You did your homework. So you take the floor, Evan,
Well,
and
let's say spoilers first.
oh yeah, spoilers, everybody.
Spoilers,
Spoilers,
spoilers.
spoilers. Okay, go away if you don't want to hear spoilers about the Wandering Fire. But everybody else, here we go.
So what I'd really love to talk about is what I think is the biggest theme in this book, and what I think is probably the biggest overall theme in the Fionavar tapestry. But to talk about that, I think we need a little bit of historical context, and I'll try to be brief about this. But basically, one of the ways that I see modern fantasy is as a loophole, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But since the arrival of the novel, the English novel in the 1700s, and the kind of consciousness that it helped to create, we've entered a world in which the writing of epics like the Odyssey and romances like the Arthurian stories is no longer possible because we're not the kind of people for whom those things were created, and there's no reverse gear. We can't become those people again. Now, I'm not saying that elements of epic and romance aren't in the novel. There absolutely are, but when we left those things behind in their sincerest original archetypal forms, we also left behind some of their unique satisfactions. And some of those things we really miss and yearn for, the sense of belonging to a great cosmic order, the chance for heroic action and adventure and enchantment and unironic affirmation of beauty and truth and love. Um, we miss those things. And so fast forward, and along comes The Lord of the Rings, right? So The Lord of the Rings is a novel. There's no question about that. But Tolkien, differing from and in some ways adding to and maybe even perfecting the project of people like William Morris, he takes many of the qualities of myth, epic, and romance and reintroduces them through a loophole, right? And I think of it as a magical side door. And the magical side door is secondary belief, what he called secondary belief, this full immersion, the unconscious acceptance of the internal logic of a fantasy world. And what's so cool about secondary belief is that you can sort of have it both ways. As readers, we're still our 21st century selves with our modern preoccupations and anxieties about personal identity and meaning. But while we're inside the story, to the extent that the author can keep us in there, we can participate in the profound lost joys of myth, epic, and romance. Now, Stephen Donaldson, who wrote the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, wrote a great essay about these ideas, which actually Philip was the first one to make me aware of a while back. And what he says is that Tolkien allowed us to dream epic dreams again, but, and there's a but, he could only do it by divorcing his work from the real world. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that Tolkien does engage with the real world, but one thing that The Lord of the Rings is not is self-reflexive. It doesn't comment on itself, on its own form. And for me, self-reflexivity is one of the great potentials of portal fantasy.
Mm.
The kind of fantasy that Donaldson wrote and the kind that we're reading in the Fionavar tapestry. Because what's so awesome about portal fantasy is that you can take a modern sensibility and put it into direct conflict with the romantic and the epic and interrogate those differences through the characters. So we have these modern characters coming into a fantasy world. And so all that said, for me, the biggest theme of the Fionavar tapestry that I can see is what happens when you take modern people and they enter a high fantasy world and start to assume the roles of mythic, epic, and romantic characters.
Archetypal.
And by the time we hit exactly, yeah, and by the time we hit the end of the Wandering Fire, all five of the Toronto Five have found those roles. And so here's just my first slide, and it's a simple one. Um,
Okay, you set that up, Evan. And just while you're doing it, everybody, this is why Evan's video essays are so cool and so much fun and so insightful. Thank you, Evan, for that. I just thought you put that perfectly in that moment. So I just want to say, awesome. Here we go.
thank you so much. I love reading about this stuff and thinking about it, and it dovetails a lot with the things I've been thinking about recently. But here we have the five main characters. At this point, at the end of the Wandering Fire, we have Paul as Quill Twiceborn, the Lord of the Summer Tree. We have Kim as the Seer. She's fused with Isan. She's the wielder of the Bile Wrath. Jennifer is now we've learned the reincarnated Queen Guinevere of the famous Arthurian stories. Kevin is Liadon, the Adonis type figure that Philip was talking about. And Dave is Davor, the warrior of the Dalrai. And what we see here is that on the positive side, I think these roles confer greater power and maybe even more importantly, purpose onto these people. In fact, in the beginning of this book, Kevin is kind of like lost and adrift because all his friends have assumed these roles, but he hasn't yet. And there's this great part where there's a POV of Kevin, which I'll just read very briefly, where he says, all he wanted was to matter. And this for Kevin Lane was the hardest thing in any world to handle. What he seemed to be here in Fionavar was utterly impotent. Every man in Gwenistrat was feeling the pull of the goddess, every man but him.
Mm,
All the glitter of his accomplishments lay squarely within his own world. How could he glory in mock trial triumphs anymore? What could possibly have meaning at home once he had watched Rangat hurl a burning hand into the sky and heard the unravelers' laughter on the north wind? So he is feeling left out. He's feeling like he doesn't have this purpose that his friends have. Now, on the negative side, these roles have downsides. They have a cost, and the cost is that they start to overshadow the individual identities,
right.
and they start to lessen or weaken these people, the Toronto Five's control over events. And we see that when Kevin assumes the role of Liadan, he has to sacrifice his own life in order to do that. And so we have like another quick slide. Paul reflects on Kevin's death, and he says that his death would never be less than a grief, but it would never be less than a thing of wonder, of glory, even. So many people died in war. So many people had died already in this one, but none had dealt such a blow to the dark as they passed over into night.
Mm,
And he gains meaning in this sacrifice. But what's the cost? Is it a trade that you would make? And that's the question I think Kay is asking us is this trade something that we're interested in, that is worthy, that is worth it? Kim is being led by the Bile Wrath. She's summoning who it wants, despite her reservations, and even characters from Fionavar like Tabor, who is merging with this unicorn creature. He's got to sever top if he the more he does that, the more he severs ties with his family and with his community and with himself. He's essentially becoming a mythic character. And the opposite process is happening with King Arthur.
yep.
King Arthur, Kay imbues King Arthur with a novelistic psychology. And we see the costs of that immediately because he is haunted by what he did to the Mayday babies. And we'll talk more about that later, but he's filled with remorse and regret and disillusionment. No character in medieval romance is disillusioned. That's not something they feel. This is a modern psychology that he's feeling, and the curse he has of having to come back again and again. It's an actual curse, but it's a psychological curse too. And we see he's feeling that. And then we have characters, and this is the last one, like Diarmid, who is fighting against his predefined romantic role as the brother of the king and the prince. You know, he's questioning whether he needs to do those things. And at the end of the book, there's this really great moment where he tells Arthur that he doesn't have to wake up Lancelot. He says that you don't have to do this. It's not written in the stars. Arthur does it anyway. But so I'll leave it there. But it's suffice it to say that these dynamics, I think, are extremely important to the book. He's taking what Tolkien did, and I think he's trying to look at it a little from a different angle. And he's using the potentials of the portal fantasy in a very, very interesting way.
Beautifully said. And something I feel that he mixes in there along with this fascinating mixture of real people, these are characters in a book, but the Toronto Five, as you've named them now, and I'm going to roll with that. And the archetypal roles that they're assuming, and then seeing archetypes enter into the story, Arthur is literally called the warrior, right? For that whole section of the book is called the warrior, the first part of the book. A common element here in a lot of these stories is the idea of sacrifice, isn't it? Even more minor characters, and PL, you talked about that, so I'll give it to you next. But even a minor character like the boy Finn, in a way
Yes.
very similar to what Kevin ends up doing, knowingly going into the situation, thinking, okay, this is my role, this is my part. I'm going to fill the shoes of this archetype and become the thing and
He's
lose.
becoming mythic too. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And Finn does it. He becomes part of the Wild Hunt, and that is a tremendous sacrifice.
And he has to say goodbye to his family.
And yeah, to his family, to his little brother, and that has repercussions, obviously, because Darian has. We'll have to talk about him as well. But PL, you had thoughts about sacrifice as a theme, I think. Anything you want to make a comment on about any of this?
Yeah, and thank you so much, Philip. And that was exceptionally well said. And Evan, I mean, wow, over the top, man, incredible. When it specifically comes to the concept of sacrifice in this book, the series I really have to get back to that. The Prince of Nothing by R. Scott Bakker. Free will is a big theme, it would seem, in that series. I've only read one book, but this is a book where, and a series, I believe, where Kay is saying basically that it is through our whole growth and development and our ability to ensure that we have free will is through sacrifice. That's how we grow. That's how we in the fate and predestination, we have a choice. It's going to hurt us. It might kill us, but we are not bound by any particular destiny. We can change it, right? And I want to read a quick quote. It's Matt Soren that says that. He says, "Never believe it. We're not slaves to the loom." Essentially goes on to say, "You are here and whole, and each thing you've endured has made you stronger. It need not be now as it has been before." And what essentially happens is through sacrifice, and Evan highlighted that, especially with some of the passages he read, is that these characters, and Philip, you talk about archetypes, they decide that I'm going to take on this archetype and be this hero, and I'm going to sacrifice whatever I'm going to sacrifice, even up to including my life, so I can be a hero and I can change the narrative. And essentially, in the face of fate and predestination, I can make a difference, right? I can actually make a difference. And, it's these acts that the characters make that they believe will make a difference, even if they're not there to see the difference. I think that's very much what defines this book. So I think the other thing that happens in all of this, and I think both of you referred to, especially Evan, with modern 21st century life, part of our biggest challenge, I think, in this age is we struggle to figure out how are we going to make a difference to change the world? What does that mean? What does that look like? But the problem is that we also, I think, believe, I think a lot of us feel we are trapped in the fact that, and part of this I have to say is our own human hubris, is that we believe we know so much. We believe we figured out so much. The cosmos, where the nearest star is, what the distance is to Mars, whether or not we're able to colonize, another part of the galaxy. We have all these knowledges that we believe things that defines everything, and yet we really don't know 0.0001 infinitesimal percent of the universe. We don't. But K gives us this huge world that is connected to other worlds. And I think he shows us that we don't need to know everything. We don't need to understand everything. But the human experience and is what defines, essentially our knowledge. It's not about knowing, the distance to the nearest star. It's about what we're doing to change, the cosmos, to figure things out, right? In our own unique ways. And I think because K gives us it's a very holistic world, right? Everything's connected and there's other worlds, but he really, in a way, he dumbs it down so that we can experience what these people in this broad world and all these connected worlds, what they're doing makes a difference. What they're doing is, I don't know if you want to call it a raindrop in an ocean, but that raindrop has ripples that can change the course of the ocean. And I think it's so beautiful the way he does it.
Oh, you expressed that wonderfully, PL. Really, that was so well said. And I agree that despite what comes across as our smallness in this vast universe, but that's not a source of despair. Rather, it's a source of empowerment because of that connection that you're talking about. And that is exactly what Stephen Donaldson in the essay that Evan referred to was talking about the power of epic fantasy to give people a sense of meaning, a sense of a role to play, and purpose. And that is just so wonderful. And the Matt Soren quote that you read there, I believe in that moment he was talking to Jennifer, was he not? Am I remembering that correctly? I think. It doesn't matter a ton. Uh, if it was indeed that conversation when he takes her to the grave of the source woman, Lisen, was that her name? I think. I think
Mm.
that's the moment when he says that to Jennifer, if I remember correctly. Beautiful scene, by the way, and it's a big part of, to me, Jennifer's ongoing healing process that it was important to me to read about that journey because during our previous discussion, I said that this scene at the end of the Summer Tree, where Jennifer is assaulted by the Dark Lord, it was absolutely brutal and really hard to read and affected me very deeply. And one of the things that we talked about, I think, in that conversation was we mentioned Robin Hobb as being a good example of someone who is really great at incorporating something like that, but treating it respectfully and then following up on it, which is essential. If you're gonna, I mean, it's something that ought to be talked about in literature, but it has to be handled, I think, very sensitively. And so one of the things that I was very concerned about when reading The Wandering Fires, what's going to be happening with Jennifer here? What's the fallout going to be? How is that going to play out? And I don't know how you guys felt. Let me hear what you guys thought about that because that was a big element of our previous discussion. I'm not saying,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, go ahead, Evan.
well, I was just gonna say that, yeah, that was a tough thing to read in the first book.
Yeah.
And I too was very curious about how he was going to handle it in this book. And the first thing we see from Jennifer in The Wandering Fire is her with Paul. Paul comes to visit her. They're back in the real world.
Hmm.
And she is adamant about having the child that was conceived. And now we didn't know that she was pregnant. I think in the first book, we
Right.
learned that pretty much right away. We're I think 7 months into the future, pretty quickly. And she's adamant about having the child. And the reason she wants to have the child is because and it goes back to this theme of free will that PL was talking about, is that she knows that it was Malgrim's plan for her to die. And so by having the child, she is asserting her free will and essentially breaking the plan that he has. He knows that whatever his plan is, this was not part of it. And so in that sense, I do think that Jennifer is, because Jennifer, when I spoke about thinly drawn characters in the first book, she is one of those characters who I think is thinly drawn. Now, Kay has a reason for that. And his reason is that she is going to be revealed to be Guinevere in this book. And so he didn't want too much of a backstory for her. Now, not all of this worked for me. I have to be honest. I don't know that that's a reason to not develop her more in the Summer Tree. And I do think the super adding of the Guinevere spirit to her may be a little too complicated. I mean, if you read in interviews, he talked about how he thought about whether or not to make Lancelot one of the other characters.
Oh my
He thought
God.
very hard about that. And the two people he was thinking about were Diarmid and Kevin.
Okay.
And we saw that he went the different directions, but he ultimately felt that it was too much to have another one of the five be the Lancelot character. It was asking too much. I think it might be asking a little too much with the Jennifer character, because this thing that happened to her, um, it it contains within it a book or more of worth of characterization that we deserve to see. And so having to go and now figure out what her relationship is with the in the love triangle, that's a whole nother thing. And I'm like, okay, but I hope we don't forget all this other stuff we've done with her. So I'm not sure that it completely worked for me. Now I love the Arthur stuff, so when it comes to that, I'm just going to buy into that and like go with it because I was so excited to see it after anticipating. I'm not sure it exactly works, but that's how I felt about it. I think there's more characterization for her in this book. I think he deals with the repercussions of what is the rape of the first book. I think I wanted a little more, but I'm glad that it wasn't left on the table and moved beyond.
And we still do have the darkest road. So let's see.
Yes, exactly. And that's the other thing to keep in mind too. I said when we reviewed the first book
Right.
that this is a full story in 3 books.
Yep.
And so making judgments at this point have the danger of being premature. So I'm definitely going to wait and see too.
Yep. Yep. Well said. PL, your thoughts on Jennifer? Anything you want to say in regard to her character and journey?
Oh, and Evan brought out some absolutely fantastic points. But I do want to say for me, it was specifically because of that concept of free will that I found it so fascinating that Kay made the choice to make Jennifer Guinevere. Because now, for the reader, all of us who know Arthurian legend, we're coming in with these preconceived notions. Okay, this is only going to go one way, right? That at some point, and Evan brought up the excellent element of Dearman saying, to Arthur, like, you don't have to bring back Lancelot, dude. Like, you don't have to do this to yourself. You don't have to put yourself through this, right? As Evan pointed out, he doesn't anyways. But we as a reader are thinking is like, what are we as a reader thinking? The ones about that I've read Arthurian legend. Well, Arthur's is gonna get betrayed by Jennifer / Guinevere. She's gonna be with Lancelot, and that's gonna bring out the end of all things. That's what we. So, like, the average reader is going to go, well, surely this is what's going to happen. But I think why Kay made that decision specifically because of that element for telling the reader, hey, listen, just to say, but despite Dearman's caution, there is that element of, hey, perhaps we can change the narrative. Perhaps, Arthur won't be betrayed. Perhaps there will be a different outcome. Perhaps it will work out positively. Perhaps. But it's up to the characters to make that happen, right? It's up to Guinevere not to betray Arthur. It's up
I'm
to
very excited for the meeting of Lancelot and Jennifer in the next book.
Yeah.
Very excited.
yeah. And now it's more about the nuances of how it happens because for me, before I read the third book, which I already have, my first thought process was, okay, I'm thinking this has to happen. It's all about the way it happens. Will the betrayal, if it happens, change the world in a positive or a negative way? Or can they escape the betrayal? Can they find a way because of free will? Can they find a way to escape it, right? But of course, again, it's because, and we talked about this our last discussion with the first book, it's because if you know the legend behind it, if you know Arthurian legend, if you've been immersed in it, like a Philip, a medievalist, someone like me who says so, you already in your mind are thinking, there's absolutely no way in every version I've read of this story, there's only one way this ends, right? But is Kay going to do something different? How is he going to do it? And what's going to be the impact? So I actually loved and Evan, you're so right. This is friggin' ambitious, man. This is ambitious. And to do what he did to in an already ambitious story, to bring this element of Arthurian legend in and make the reader with all these preconceived notions about what's going to happen with these characters. And then at the end, like you said, Jeremy's like, hey, bro, you sure you want to do this? And I think that in itself it was a part of the book that I really loved because of, Kay went for it, man. He went for it, right?
Yeah.
He fell for the fences. So
That's for sure. Yeah.
Can we jump into the Arthur stuff?
That's exactly where I wanted to go next. It seems like the
yeah,
logical place to go, given that Arthur deliberately he has a choice there at the end of this when they're at Kader Sadat and the Isle of the Dead, this fortress in the land of the dead, which is straight out of the Mabinogion. The ship, the dog, Caval, all
The
of it,
cauldron.
the cauldron, all of the above, the cauldron that brings the dead people back to life, straight out of Welsh myth and the Mabinogion particularly. But Arthur, in that moment, knows what's going to happen to him. And he still says, no, we need Lancelot. We need this guy
Hmm.
right now in the time we're in. And he takes the hit. He makes the sacrifice, knowing what is going to happen. Again, I think you can see both free will and a sense of fate hanging over this decision, can't you? So, thoughts on Arthur? Let's go there. Let's do all the Arthurian stuff now,
So I
guys.
might have some slides for this. I might
Let's
have a
do it.
slide or two. So, so I just want to say that when we had the last conversation, I somewhat flippantly said that it was a flaw if in the Summer Tree or any book if you had to have some foreknowledge of myth or legend. And PL had a great response to that made me in the moment think, well, yeah, that's a little bit too hasty. And the result of that comment is that I spent the entire last month reading through the Arthurian canon. And let me tell you, Philip knows this a little bit already. This is my idea of fun, and it was a lot of fun. And I just want to go over some of what I read real quick. I
So you do
read
that.
I read Gildas, I read Nennius, I read the relevant parts of the Mabinogion that we talked about. I read Geoffrey of Monmouth's History of the Kings of Britain. I read all but one of the Arthurian romances from Chrétien de Troyes, who was a personal favorite in this because he's such a great writer. Then I read Le Mort d'Arthur, which I know is PL's one of his favorite books. Now that is a chunker. We talk about fantasy chunkers. That's a big one, and it is wow. And especially the ending of that,
Hmm.
the last 4 or 5 books, which tells the story of Guinevere and Arthur and Lancelot, is where I think Mallory really comes into his own. And I finished that where Arthur dies. He's killed by
Spoiler.
Mordred, of course. Yeah, spoiler. He's killed by Mordred, of course. And the next thing I read was The Wandering Fire. And I have to tell you that seeing Arthur resurrected after the death, was very emotional. It was emotional for me to see him come back.
Yeah.
And then after The Wandering Fire, I read Idylls of the King, which I really
Medicine.
loved.
Yeah.
Tennyson, and then to finish it off,
I'll take it.
I read A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. Oh, and I read the first book of Bernard Cornwell's trilogy, which is awesome.
Yep.
Oh my
Yep.
God! And I know you guys talked about that.
We
I
did. We had
cannot wait to read.
discussions. Yep.
I cannot wait to read the rest of that. And I also watched Excalibur from 1981, which is extraordinary, really extraordinary.
Chef's
I
kiss.
think it gets to the alienness of the Arthur story that in a
Yes.
special way. Anyway, that was my month,
I
and
just
it
love, I
was
gotta say, for
What a
one,
month.
I
What a
love
month.
that PL went all Treebeard on you and said, "Don't be
yes,
hasty," and it led
yes,
to this. This is so cool.
yes. I mean, I anyway. So let's talk about Arthur because what's the first thing that happens when he comes back? Um, Kim has to learn what his name is in order to summon him.
Uther.
She wakes up Uther, his dad, good old daddy, and she tells him or he tells her, she finds out that the name is Child Slayer. What does that mean? If you don't know the Arthurian legend, uh, I'm going to bring up just a very brief uh, quote here from Le Morte d'Arthur that will explain everything you need to know about what happens here. Do we see this?
Yep.
Okay. There's three key things to understand about Arthur for this story, I think. The first is that in in chapter 20 of book one, Merlin, and these are all prophecies, and this really goes to the heart of the free will thing in this series. Um, Merlin tells Arthur, "Ye have done a thing late that God is displeased with you. For ye have lain by your sister, and on ye have gotten a child that shall destroy you and all the knights of your realm." Now, Arthur has an unknowing incestuous relationship with his sister Morgause, and begets Mordred. Then Merlin comes and says, "Hey, this guy, this son of yours, is going to basically destroy everything, destroy you." Arthur doesn't. He makes no response to that. That's one of the crazy things about Le Morte d'Arthur is that a lot of times they have no reaction to these prophecies. But then the next one, and this is the important one, few chapters later, King Arthur, uh, uh, we have this quote. Then King Arthur let send for all the children born on May Day, begotten of lords and born of ladies. For Merlin told King Arthur that he that should destroy him should be born in May Day. And so there were found many lords' sons, and all were sent unto the king, and all were put on a ship to the sea, and some were 4 weeks old, and some less. And so by fortune the ship drove unto a castle, and was all to riven, and destroyed the most part, save that Mordred was cast up, and a good man found him. So what is happening here is that Merlin tells him that Mordred's going to destroy him. And so Arthur's like, okay, so all the children who were born around that time, we don't know exactly where it is, who it is. We're going to round them all up, put them on a boat, and just drift them out to sea. Now, this is passed over without comment in the medieval romance, but Kay, and I think quite rightly, sees that this is a moral decision that for a modern consciousness like ours is more than cruel. It's barbaric and devastating, and so this is his genius, is that he makes the once and future king return motif of Arthur into a curse. And the curse set upon him by the Weaver is that he has to come back and fight all these different battles because of what he did to these babies.
Yeah.
And the last thing, just really quickly, is that another prophecy, Merlin warns him that Guinevere is not wholesome, and that she's going to fall in love with Lancelot, and Lancelot's going to fall in love with her. And this is another one where he just does it anyway and doesn't, he doesn't make any comment about it. He just marries her, and all that stuff comes to pass. What's so interesting here is that we have a completely different take on the Arthurian tale. And Kay commented about this in an interview. He said, on an almost glib level, One might say that what I'm doing in the Fionavar tapestry is trying to provide a treatment that allows the Arthurian characters to escape their foretold fate. That is, in fact, my Eucatastrophe. That's a Tolkienian term.
Hmm.
It's entirely possible that this deep sense of frustration, he's talking about frustration that he had, even of resentment against the notion of a foretold doom, against the notion of prophecies that are fulfilled, even though people have been warned about them, and we just saw those prophecies, has led to my interest in free will. Free will is a fundamental theme in all my writing. It's deeply important to me that I believe in it. So that's just a quick primer on the Arthur stuff that I think is a very fascinating part of this book, and I loved reading it.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that once again, sacrifice, free will, all this stuff reverberates throughout this entire story. It's a sign, I think, of a great writer when you can take various arcs within your story and make them so thematically linked, and keep giving us different iterations of that theme. And we certainly have it in spades in the Arthurian portion of all of this. But really with all the characters. But I want to give PL a chance to react to what Evan just put out there before we move on to any of the other characters. I'm dying to get to what was my favorite part of this book was actually Kevin's part, the Adonis part. But first, PL, go to town with the Arthurian stuff and what Evan just talked about, if you like.
Fabulous, Evan. You hit on all these incredible points. You know, I do want to say that let's not forget. And again, Mallory is. I mean, I wrote the last thesis paper I wrote. You know, I'm dating myself here. Probably before Evan was born. In university was about Lamort, and you know, I remember. I think that's the book that I've read more. I've read every single thing on and Evan. Like, dude, that is next level for you to read all of those books,
Yeah.
essentially as a prep for. Like, I mean, that dude. Hats off to you, man. And I think because when we look at the tale of specifically the Mayday babies, let's go back to two specific biblical references. One, Seti, the Pharaoh, who, you know, tries to kill, male babies in Egypt in order to avoid Moses, the deliverer, from coming, and fails, right? Because, you know, Moses is rescued and raised as a prince of Egypt. And let's also discuss King Herod and Jesus, who attempts to do the same thing. And, you know, in both those specific biblical references, yeah, you can't escape these efforts to slaughter children only result in the prophecy coming true one way or another, right? You know, I think this free will thing, and Evan did such an excellent job of, now we have the author's words himself that free will that's a central thematic thing that he's intentionally putting in there. And, you know, I mean, as an author, Philip, you know, myself, we know that authors' intentionality really, really matters in any work that they write. And when it comes to the intentionality of Arthur knows what does that say? Basically, it never works out. I always die, basically, right? You know, like in every scenario, in every possible fate, I'm gonna die, right? I'm gonna get betrayed, and I'm gonna die, and he still does it, right? He still does it because, no, we need Lancelot. That's way more important because, in other words, I'm gonna die anyways, right? I'm gonna die anyways. So, and I'm probably gonna get betrayed anyways. But we need Lancelot to make the difference. And I think, and we keep going back to this thing about sacrifice and free will, but the brilliance of Kay is that, you know, I was watching a video. I think it was, I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was Four Corners of the Page, Dave on YouTube. Great channel. Check him out. I think he was talking about, whether or not morals and stories that seem preachy he's had a new perspective on that. Whether or not, if an author is very intentional, certain role, whether or not that's a bother, or is it about how it's done, or whether it's overdone. But what Kay does, I think, in this, and this is where you see his brilliance, is he lays these landmines, and he gets the reader thinking, but then the resolution is ones that I think in for all his intentionality gives the reader room to explore and think about the theme without him necessarily coming out and saying right away, like, this is what it is, right? And I love
Yeah.
that
Well,
aspect.
it begs the question. It begs the question of how is this Arthurian situation going to be resolved in the third book? Because the Arthurian world is a world of prophecy, like we were seeing. The world of the epic and the romance. These characters are in many ways bound by fates that are determined, whether or not they listen to the prophecies or not. Whether when Arthur tries to act against the prophecy, it doesn't work. By killing all the babies, it still doesn't work. Mordred is saved. Um, I suspect that Kay is going to have a different resolution to this than we've seen previously in order to bolster this idea of free will. And there is free will. I just want to point out is baked into this universe. And it comes in a very important short passage here where they're going to blow the horn, and she's walking through the forest. I won't read the first part, but she's going through all the gods, right? At the very end, it says, "This is Kim, by the way." And far, far above all this, outside of time, the shuttle of the world loom slowed and then was still, and the weaver too watched to
Hmm.
see what would come back into the tapestry. And
Hmm.
so what we have here is an action that even the godlike figure is not in control of. So this is emphatically not a deterministic universe, and that is echoed, I think, also in what happens next, which is the wild hunt. The wild hunt is not something that is wild, like the bile wrath, the ring that she wears. They are wild magic, and those things are not. Even though it's in a sense controlling Kim, it itself cannot be controlled. Just like the wild hunt can't be controlled. And there's a scene at the end, a very good and scary scene where the wild hunt goes further than expected. They unleash the wild hunt and they kill all the baddies, and then they start killing our friends, and we're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Well, this is because it's wild magic, magic that can't be controlled by anything. And so this is a universe where there is always going to be space for free will to disrupt the plans of any greater power, even the greatest god.
Yeah. Well said.
No, yeah. I just want to quickly say though, but also though, in that backdrop, there is still room for prophetic events,
Uh-huh.
and that's what I was talking about in terms of Kay doesn't just tell you, nope, free will stop this prophecy from happening, and it doesn't matter what the prophecy is. There is obviously an element of some things are predetermined.
And there's, I think, going to be some more exploration of this just to wrap up the Jennifer/Guinevere portion of all of this. There's the character of her son, Darian, whom some of the other characters are like, why would you let him live? He's the son of the big baddie. And that's a big assumption that he is destined to be evil because of his parentage. I'm interested to see what Kay does with this character. Obviously, we have it feels like, in the Wandering Fire, Darian seems like he could kind of go either way. Like he's been shown love by Finn and by Vey, the woman who takes the role of his mother. He's been shown love. Is that going to be enough for him to, uh, if he has a nature that needs to be defied, is that going to be enough to defy that nature? Or is it or just the fact that he's powerful? Does that mean he has to become an evil character? So I'm very interested to see where that character goes. I don't know if you guys have any comments on Darian before we move on.
I was confused that he would. I was a little confused by how fast he was growing up
Uh-huh.
until I realized that he's like a half god figure and they
Yeah.
grow faster.
Yeah.
But for a second I was like, have we moved forward in the story like 10 years? So
Uh-huh.
he's like a 12-year-old now.
Yep. No,
But
yeah,
yes,
he's
I
got the
also
half god blood in him. So yeah, I guess
oh the classic half god blood. Yeah, of
that's
course.
how it works, Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So good. So I do want to move on. There's more than just Arthurian stuff in here. There's, as I said in the beginning, there's the Greek myth of Adonis, which significantly, this is how we get past the big stratagem of the
Yes.
bad side is that this winter has paralyzed. Like you don't even have to. He doesn't even have to attack because he's basically weakening the opposition by this with this terrible winter, which is, there's all kinds of wonderful myths about like the Fimbulvetr in Norse, which precedes the Ragnarok, the this big terrible winter that kills everything, and so there's lots of mythological examples of this, and you even have this one figure who tries to kill Paul at a certain point of this Ice Queen who appears. I'm assuming
Yeah.
she'll come back as well. But all of this is essentially negated by Kevin's sacrifice, which I thought was a wonderfully incorporated, again, the theme of sacrifice, the theme of free will. This is Kevin knowing what he's going into, doing this, feeling that moment of this is my role, but also reverberating from that myth of Adonis, where Adonis is not just beloved of Aphrodite, Adonis is beloved by Persephone. And in some of the versions of the story, Adonis has to spend a big portion, half the year, or a third of the year, or whatever it might be, depending on the story, in the underworld. And then Adonis comes back. And in that sense, it could be seen as the sacrificial king figure who, again, there are all kinds of myths about, read Fraser, there's all kinds of myths about the king who gets sacrificed to ensure the arrival of spring, and the cycle goes on and on. And Adonis has been taken by some to be a representation of that type of figure. I just loved, again, here's a character who, and as you pointed out already, Evan, he was floundering. He didn't know, what's my role in this? Who am I? What's my what he doesn't say it in these words, but what's my archetype here? What am I supposed to be? Where's my meaning in all of this? And I thought it was beautifully done the way he found it, and the way he unites with Dana, the goddess, and confers the power through his sacrifice on her in order to combat this winter. So thoughts on that from either of you guys on the Kevin arc? PL, you want to go first?
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. I think, and part of it, the entire festival, like, I guess for
Yeah.
me, because I also love Greek mythology, the whole sexual, erotic, the festival, the whole nature of that felt very, all my thoughts now you're shifting to Greek, Roman mythology. You're in a different headspace, but at the end of the day, it was I cried. I cried after after Kevin's sacrifice, and that's a good sign for if you make me cry in a book, you got to me, right? And I
It's a
cried
great sign.
twice
Come
in book.
on. That's what we want.
I cried
We want the
twice in
tingle.
this
Remember
series.
the tingles. We talked about the tingles
Tingles.
last time.
Yeah, I cried twice in the series. I cried with Kevin's sacrifice, and I cried at what happens in book 3, and you will see. And I guarantee you, I think that the sacrifice in book 3 will bring you to tears. Because not only is, I'm not trying to spoil things here, it is just the entire thing is just so beautifully written. It is just one of the best scenes that and I, as a writer, I have little, I take little elements of everything I've ever read in my life, whether it's Dr. Seuss, whether it's the Bible, whether it's, Lamort, whether it's, and I'll put a little Easter egg, a little homage to, if it's just part of a phrase that we turn in all, it's sprinkled throughout all my writing. And this scene with Kevin sacrifice, I have not done that yet, but I will, in some form or fashion, I will pay tribute to, because this scene was so powerful. But the one thing that like, I think the whole concept of this sacrifice, the effect was immediate and tangible. Winter was over, right? It wasn't just, like, we read stories where, the hero sacrifice might help turn the tide of a battle, or, might save another hero to go on to turn the tide. But this has broad reaching effects, right? So I think that was one of the reasons why it was so poignant. It would have been as if, for me, as if Paul died on the tree,
Mm.
right? Like, this was a pivotal moment of the book that might actually get overshadowed as you read on. But I hope that, readers will really focus in and hone on this sacrifice in particular, because not only is it essentially the first real major loss for the Toronto Five, as Evan has dubbed them, but
Not the Toronto Four.
it's the
That's
Toronto,
oh.
It's too soon.
Toronto
Sorry,
Four. Oh
sorry,
yeah,
sorry. Too
but
soon.
but 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 I just want to. I hope that we take a moment to understand, what Kevin did, and the fact that you have to figure he went out happy, right? He went out happy that he found his place, as Philip pointed out. He found he found his purpose, and he died, in this. I mean, the way he died. I mean, lots of jokes.
Oh.
There are gonna be lots of jokes that we can go to here about that. But how do you want to go out, right? But
I mean, as things
like,
go,
It's
yeah.
not the worst way.
as things go, it's not a bad way to go, right? So but the point is, again, this sacrifice to end winter is one of the biggest and most important moments in the entire series. And but it unfortunately, it does get, I think, overlooked, because because of the sacrifice that happens in the following book. But still, I hope that people do realize how momentous this was, and how incredibly well written it was.
I do want to just briefly interject regarding the sexual element of all of this. I actually admire the way Kay does this here. And look, sex is part of what we are. I mean, none of us would be here without it, and it is behind a lot of the greatest stories and accomplishments. Is this drive that we have and our various ways of dealing with it, and the consequences of our actions as we attempt to deal with it, and oftentimes not very well. But this is there's something really primal and I think appropriate to the way he writes this, because it's very much linked to fertility. We're bringing back the spring here, right? And what Kevin does with the goddess Dana is an act of fertility, fundamentally. And there's a really deep insight there in the myths. This isn't just Guy Gavriel Kay. This is something he's tapping into once again, that goes way, way back. This is a fundamental understanding of the nature of life, of existence, of how we are in this world. Something that is just a deep part of what it means to be alive. So I actually like that part of all of this in this particular section here. I thought that was really cool. But Evan, your thoughts on Kevin's
Yeah,
arc?
I mean, um, you know, all that you guys said was brilliant. And I want to jump off of one thing that PL said. He mentioned Paul, and for me, this sacrifice is a major parallel to the first book and Paul and the Summer Tree.
Yep.
And so many of these legends and myths, you go all the way back. What it's all really about is, the land and the harvest and getting food and survival. And what we have in both of these cases is Paul it sacrifices for the good of the land, because what Paul is sacrificing for in the first book is because the land is in a drought, and his time on the summer tree brings back life to the ground. And essentially, what Kevin does here is the same thing, except for he's returning the land from a winter. to a flourishing. And in the Greek myth, I believe when Adonis is hit by the boar, which happens to Kevin here.
Yeah.
In case in case you didn't get it,
Also, whenever it's
um,
the thigh, it really means something very near the thigh. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
K K is I just say K is really signposting, and he doesn't want you to miss it. So
Right.
he has that. But when he bleeds, I think we have is it the anemone flower that
Yes.
comes up from the ground?
And it's red.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so we have this growth, this flourishing,
Life.
this return of the land into and that goes with this idea that Philip was talking about of fertility. It's this idea of flourishing. It all goes back to the same thing. And so I really thought that parallel was poignant. Um, the do you guys remember what the festival the midsummer. Well, the other part of the thing that's connected to the myth is that there was a festival for the death of Adonis. I think it's called Adonia, and it wasn't a sexual festival, but I think what happened was they made uh, garlands and threw them into the sea or something. Do you know that, Philip or PL?
Yeah. You want to talk about that?
Sorry, am I muted? Yeah. Essentially, there was a cult that formed
Yeah.
regarding Adonis, and I think Evan, you raised some excellent points. Not only did this cult form, but because remember Adonis died in Aphrodite's arms when he was speared by the boar, right? And so Adonis took on Aphrodite, of course, is a goddess. So Adonis took on almost godlike, like was almost deified because of this. And like I think if I'm not mistaken, women would like offer incense and they would weep like basically uncontrollably and inconsolably about like on the anniversary of Adonis's death. There was the festival, as you mentioned, it was done by Greek women specifically every year at midsummer, and it was the funny thing is that the essentially the festival was like already celebrated in Lesbos uh, during the seventh century, Sappho's time, and at the start of the festival, women would plant this garden of Adonis, right? They plant this garden in a basket or in like broken pottery and stuff like that, and then they would. I think one of the things they would do is like if once they planted plants and if they once they withered, they would cry over the death of Adonis. They would tear their clothes. Like it was crazy. Like he had a cult. Like he had a cult going, right? And I think the other thing they would do, and I don't remember if they'd jump off the top of roofs or they'd climb ladders or like there was all these things that came out of this worship of Adonis and turned into this cult and this festival, right? And it was just like so. It's fascinating that you know, and, and of course we have to read on to see more about some of the repercussions and things that happen. Like it's not just it transcends book two. So, but this specific sacrifice, like I said, I hope it's not lost. And it's nice to see that. I mean, in the Adonis mythology, Adonis certainly his memory lived on through this festival and through all these things that happen, and that's why he's become someone of legend. So the parallel here that Kay's doing, you would hope that in the world of Fionavar, that Kevin also lives on somewhat in the same way.
As
I just
Leodon.
want to quickly, very briefly on the sex thing that Philip mentioned. I just want to say that I so appreciate Kay's willingness to make this a part, and we've seen now in three books, Tigana and the Summer Tree and the Wandering Fire, that he has he has a willingness and an interest in making this a part of his writing, and so I'm going to be looking for, and I think this, there are times when he treats it clumsily, and that's, I think, you know, that comes with it, but it's a subject that not many fantasy writers are comfortable with broaching. And so just the fact that he's broaching it and trying to explore it from different angles, we saw in Tigana that he explores it from a very political angle. And so I'm going to be keeping my eye out in the year to come for the ways in which this idea, this theme of sex, is explored. And so I've seen enough now to know that it's going to be a big part, I think, of his.
Can I make a quick comment
Mm.
about that?
Yeah.
Having read a lot of GTK as well, that and I'm going to be glued to watching your journey, the two of you with all your guests as you go through the entire GTK world. I haven't read everything he's written, but I've read a lot more than just Fionavar. What I've read from GGK specifically about the theme of sex, sexual relations, sexual violence, sex as a weapon, sex as a beautiful part of life, all the things that he does in terms of that aspect of human behavior. The one thing I think he does specifically, and I think thematically through all of his books, is the one thing I love about it is the courage with, I think Evan kind of hinted at that, the courage with which he approaches, kind of a very open, honest discussion about how it affects us, right? You're going to see characters in GTK where you're going to see prostitutes. You're going to see people who use sex as manipulation. You're going to see people who are enamored sexually of other people, and that infatuation drives them to do certain things. You're going to see all kinds of representations involving that. But I love the honesty and the diversity with which GGK explores that in all of his novels. So I do really enjoy that.
Yeah, there's a bit of a crackling going on there. All
This
right.
meeting is being recorded.
Technical difficulties
You
have been
better know.
resolved. Come for the conversation, stay for the tech savvy. That's my motto. Anyway, we have, I think, covered the biggest arcs in here, but there are some very important other arcs going on. And so we're going to dive into Dave and the doll ray, but also Kim and her role in the summoning of the wild hunt and all of that. So, either one of you want to start us off on that thread?
Well,
Please go ahead, Evan.
I'll just say that one of the things at the end of the book, because I missed this going through, was thinking about is what is the wandering fire? I was thinking, what was the wandering fire? And then I went back through some of the sections. I realized, oh, the wandering fire is the Balraith. It is the ring that Kim wears on her finger, and it is summoning people for the war against Malgrim. And the first person it summons in this book is King Arthur. And the second person or people it helps to summon are the Wild Hunt. And she is helped by Dave with the horn that he got in the forest in the last book. And I think what I'm looking for from Kim in the third book, because is set up here, is what is her relationship to this ring going to be moving forward? Because we're talking about free will. I do think that she is ambivalent. She is ambivalent about what she is being called to do by this ring, and by having another person essentially in her consciousness. And so I'm so curious if she's going to continue to uh, uh, follow the lead of these magical items, or if she's going to strike out on her own in an act of free will. And then for Dave, Dave is one of those characters who in the real, like, because we had the Kevin thing, which was Kevin in the real world was like a star, and he was like going to be this hotshot lawyer, and everything was going great for him, and that was part of the reason he felt so lost and adrift in Fionavar, because in his world he was the dude, and here he's like just Kevin, while his friends are these archetypes like we've been talking about. Now the opposite of that is Dave, who he was not really that invested in the things that were going on in the real world, and as soon as he got landed with the Dalrai in the first book, he's like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Found my
You know,
tribe.
this
Yeah.
this is my tribe. These are my people. He fell in with them very quickly, and in the interim, he said he's kept his body in shape. He couldn't wait to get back and unleash that axe and run with the Dalrai. And so I love all the Dalrai sections. Like Philip said, it is pure entertainment. It is I think what he did best in the first book, and I could have even seen more from it here. The one thing I mentioned from before is this dynamic with Tabor and the unicorn, because we have this great scene where Tabor fuses with the unicorn in the early fight and starts like he is massacring all these evil elves or wolves or whatever, bad people, and it's brutal. And Ivor, Tabor's father, starts to realize that the more he connects with the unicorn, the more he's losing his identity. And so I'm very curious to see how far that goes in the second book. And like we said before, that's also connected with Finn. Finn leaving his identity to join with the Wild Hunt is another thing I'm curious to see if there's development on in the next part. But yeah, there's a lot there. There's so much going on in these books, man. There is so much going on, and I think he handles it pretty well for the most part. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on Kim and Dave.
Excellent. Yeah, I love what you said about Kim and the idea that she actually feels pretty terrible about the fact that her role seems to be summoning others to fulfill their role. And oftentimes it's causing a great deal of suffering for those people. And she understands that. And it's something she feels terrible about and has gone off. She has her moment of solace there with Lauren, which during the festival, during the summer solstice and all that, which I was like, good for her, and Lauren and the rest, but then she's gone off on this quest with the one dwarf, and they're not left in a very good
Yes.
place, and they're
No.
not a good place at all. And they're supposed to be going to help these giants who have been seemingly they're being tortured. So I'm very curious to see what happens with that element. But the gentle giants that are masters of this world of dream, it seems. So that's going to be a really interesting element here as well. But they seem to be like in one of those mythical ancient peoples, but yeah, that you encounter all the time. But PL, I'll let you take the floor for with Kim's arc here, and also if you want to react to what Evan was saying about Dave and the doll ray and all of that stuff.
Well, specifically with Kim, and those are all excellent points that both you and Evan raised. So those are wonderful points. I always look in every fantasy book that involves some element of predestination or prescience, or prophecy, or a seeress, or a mage, or somebody who has some idea about what might
Should
be
we
coming.
should we do something about
This meeting is being recorded.
How did I move?
We have PL and Evan have magically switched places. And we have resolved our technical issue. So PL, sorry, please continue to make your point.
No, thanks so much. It's all right. It was my fault. So I'm the cause of the technical issue. Don't know what this crackling was about. But anyways, so every fantasy book I read, I always look for who the serious prophetess is, or person prophesying, not necessarily male, female, elements of predestination and prescience, and I always look for that person as, because they're always a focal point, and I'm always looking to see, first of all, what's the extent of their powers? How much can they see? How much do they know? And what can they do to influence? And I think you both brought up these excellent points about Kim, in that, it is someone who interprets prophecy, and someone who, is it a passive role? Like simply you're just a cipher and you're like, hey, yeah, like, oh, like I saw what happened in the future, right? Look back in the past and saw it, or, and that's basically it. Is it a tool that you can use? Like, so in other words, since I know that, so-and-so, might die, if I make sure that they don't go to that one battle, I can save them, right? So I'm always really curious and fascinated as to what role someone who has prophetic powers plays in any piece of fiction, in fantasy specifically. And in Kay's work with Kim, I think she is struggling, as you both said, with the fact that her role seems to be, yeah, I'm gonna help bring these people back, some of them from the dead, or reanimate them, or reincarnate them, whatever, and then they might just die again horribly for the sake of, but I'm doing it for the greater good. And but what always fascinates me about these positions specifically with these people with press is, like, there's a cost to all that. There's a mental, psychological toll of seeing the future. There's a mental, psychological toll of seeing the past and seeing things that perhaps other people wouldn't want to see. There's a toll of the responsibilities that come with those kinds of gifts and talents. But I want to say what I love about what Case we did with Kim is that he portrays that very real. We don't often see that in literature. The mage or the magician or the warlock, whatever, seems pretty normally, like, a lot of times callous, cold, does their stuff with like a clinical kind of execution. You don't see the cost, so I love that about what he did with the Kim character, that you do see the emotional, psychological cost, and you see that, okay, it bothers her, right? You see that weight. Like, I mean, we love Gandalf from the Rings, but for all we know of Gandalf, he his powers and what he has to do and how he feels about them, and the horrible things he has to do, we don't necessarily know how he feels, right, all the time about
I mean,
that
throwing
stuff.
out those
So
little hobbits into the world, like, here, go get rid of the ring, Frodo. I mean, he might have felt bad.
yeah, he might have felt bad about that, but yeah, there's a lot less, you know. Like I said, I guess my impression overall from a lot of reading a lot of fantasy is that those characters typically have a bit more of a Machiavellian type, like, yeah, I'm the puppet master and I'm moving things and I can see the future, but this isn't that with what Kay does with Kim,
No,
so I
she's
really enjoy
certainly
that.
ambivalent about the role she has to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that as a sport. And when it comes to Dave, everything he does, it's funny how we talked a bit. I wasn't sure if it was Philip or everyone that brought up the excellent point about the whole Karsa Orlong from Malazan narrative, or Conan the Barbarian, or those type of brute. Yeah, it was Evan. Thank you. Brute strength, but and not necessarily dumb or ignorant, but or simple, but a character that, like, the actions he's taken seem simplistic in terms of the fight. Be that big, strong fighter that And Dave is a lot more nuanced than that. But what I'm saying is that I think for us as fantasy readers, there's always that element where the entertainment value. I think I wasn't sure if it was Philip or Evan who mentioned it. That entertainment value of those storylines always provide that catharsis in terms of those battles and those physically heroic moments that I think we all look for. And that's why whenever Dave showed up, and he's with the Lamb, we talked about the whole horse lord element, whether it's the Riders of Rohan or whatever, that whole thing that we just love about those roaming, kind of nomadic, equine, based, warrior societies, where like, there's something about that really gets you going, I think, when you read fantasy, and I continue to enjoy that about this aspect with Dave and everything that he does, and I think it just bleeds that classic, when a lot of people think of heroes, that's what Kay is giving us with Dave. So it's fun to read. It's fun to read.
Yeah. One of my favorites of the Del Rey, who I agree, I think we talked about it last time. They're basically the Riders of Rohan, but with a kind of Native American influence in there as well, with the shamanistic element of Geraint, who is one of my favorite characters there, and I love the role that he plays at the end in
Yeah.
helping Paul to get past that huge sea creature that is sucking away the souls of all the poor light elves that have gone. They thought
Oh,
all went.
that was
That
so
was so
sad. That was
tragic.
sad.
That was so tragic that all
Great
those,
reveal. Great reveal.
yeah, Leos Alfar, who that they thought had been going to their destiny, to their other world. They're essentially in Tolkien. It's a very big Tolkien element in here, the idea that the elves would go off to their own set apart world, whereas humans die and that kind of thing. But this is pure K. This horrible sea creature has been intercepting them all these years, all these centuries. Wow, that was poignant, and you could hear their song still and all of that. But the fact that he gives Paul that extra push there in that pivotal moment from the land, because he's anchored in the land, and that is the power that Paul has, is the power of the patriarch God, whose name is slipping my head at the moment. But
More near?
more near, yeah, more near, yeah. I thought that was a cool touch there at the end, and they also get the staff in the process through Diarmuid's gallantry. They get the staff of the ancient wizard, who that plays a role as well, enabling Lauren losing his power in the process because, of course, his source dies and gets resurrected there at the end. So a lot of interesting things at the end. I will be interested in seeing what becomes of Matt, as now he can potentially resume his role as the king of the dwarfs, which I am assuming is going to be a part of the third book. And what's Lauren going to do now that he's not a mage anymore?
Not a mage anymore. Not with the resurrection, he's not a
Yeah.
mage anymore.
Well,
So
as
any
long as
other,
as long as
go
as
ahead.
long as we're talking about cool scenes that we liked,
Yeah.
to finish up here, one of the things I really loved was early in the book when we have Shalhasan and the Cathal coming in to Brennan, and he thinks he's like
Yeah.
ready to take over this. He's like, "Oh, I figured it all out. You know, these two brothers who are running things up there. They don't know what they're doing." And he is quickly disabused of that idea, and we see just how much of a kind of comedic relief character he is. And I like this because it was a little bit of levity in a very serious and sometimes very dark series so far. Um, and on that point, the character of Diarmid, who was certainly, I think, the most charismatic character of the Summer Tree. I think he doesn't have enough to do here, so I'm excited what he sees in to see what he does in the last book, and also Shara, who I had high hopes for this book. It kind of disappointed me how little she had to do in this book because she was a standout from the first book, and I was hoping, especially that scene with with the throwing of the knife, and I was hoping that she would from the Summer Tree. I was hoping she would, she would sort of balloon into a little bit of a bigger character. But I did like that scene with Shah Hassan. I love the scene with the Wild Hunt because of the reversal. Sorry, the battle scene with the Wild Hunt, the reversal of the Wild Hunt attacking the Dalray and the good guys. That was genuinely scary, and I found myself hoping, maybe in a George R. R. Martin type way, that
Yeah.
it would have gone a little further because it ends pretty quickly after that with Kindwen stepping in, and then all of a sudden she has sex with Dave. Okay, we'll see how that, like we'll see how that all turns out. And then the ending was, I thought, pretty spectacular because I did love the Leo Salfar reveal with the water monster. I love the Geraint connection, summoning the sea god. I love the fact that the gods are not supposed to take part in have an effect on on what's going on in the world, but they're drawn in by Paul and by other forces here. And then you get the fake out of you think Arthur's gonna sacrifice himself, and what actually happens is Lauren does that with Matt Soren, and so I'm excited to see, like Philip said, how those things are treated in the next book. And then you do have the Arthurian Easter egg of Lancelot reviving Matt Soren because he does that to Sir Uri in Le Morte d'Arthur. And when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, I know that! I get that reference." um, there's a point in Le Morte where all the knights are asked to revive this guy or help heal this guy, and none of them can do it. And finally, Lancelot comes back. And in the book, in the Wandering Fire, Lancelot just tosses off the. I've done this once before, and,
Yeah.
and that's what he's.
That was awesome. That was one of my favorite parts. Like the ending of this book, just
Yeah,
it just
yeah.
gave me those shivers because of Voldemort and all the Arthurian stuff, and also just I'm sorry, but I mean, I feel like any reader, especially, and again, like we talked a lot the last couple of sorry, the last conversation about having to whether or not you should need to know the Arthurian legends, the source material, and again the incredible research and reading
Careful
that
what you say, PL. Careful what you say here, because you could launch me into a month of reading anything right now.
Uh,
but consider this though. This is what I do want to focus on. You know, Lancelot's reluctance, knowing that what he could do. He loves Arthur, like as a brother. He loves Guinevere romantically and also as a friend. He loves both of them, and he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to do this either. He doesn't want to go through this again. He doesn't want to go through, this love triangle. He doesn't want to because he loves them both,
Oh
right?
yeah, that
And
really comes through in the Arthur
like it
stories.
really, that was a really poignant scene, and in the end, when Arthur goes, "Oh, come, Lance," like she's waiting for you,
hmm.
right? Like I mean, if that doesn't give you a little bit of a chill, like ooh, like this is not going to end well, but everybody's on board. Everybody's on board. They all know it's probably not going to end well, but everybody's on board because it's too important, right? And I think that incorporation of the Arthurian legend it was always a game changer here, right? It was really a game changer and I
Yeah,
know Evan, you're so right about the fact that it's so freaking ambitious to do
it
this,
is.
right?
It
Look,
is.
even the
But
gods, he even subjects the gods to these themes. Like when he has Paul summoning Liranan, which is a very clever, Mananan Maclir is the Irish god of the sea, and he makes it Liranan, combining the Maclir and the Mananan, giving us the name, the equivalent of the Welsh Manawydan, Ap Clir, which is the Welsh version of that sea god. He wants to participate, but he's not able to because of the gods being forbidden from direct interference. But they have ways of kind of manipulating a little bit, and and he's like, once Paul is able to compel him, he throws himself into it fully. So there you go. Kay is exploring the free will thing and the faith thing, even with the gods in the story. Or you have Kainwin, who she's gotten herself in some trouble here, probably because of how far she's gone in interfering. So again, free will, fate. How are we bound by larger forces? How much room do we have to act within that? Even the gods are part of that theme, really. So yeah.
yeah, and I think that Evan had touched upon it about the wild hunt. Like the wild hunt is one of my favorite elements in like when they show up. Like I never played the whole the Witcher. I'm not a gamer. I never did the whole Witcher thing, but a lot of my friends who are like that's their favorite part of the Witcher video games, and like it's just uh, what Kay does with them, and the fact that, as Evan pointed out, they are wild hunt, like hello, like uncontrollable, arbitrary in who they will kill, this unstoppable like death force, like it was creepy. It's almost like a cosmic horror element that I absolutely love. You know, it's something that I think, and again, just pointing again to Kay's ambition because he throws all these elements in there, right? And they're amazing. And it depends on how you perceive it, how well he's executed it, as Evan said, like how well it lands. But to me, I love the fact that he goes for it. I love the fact that he includes these elements, and it does enrich the story. I really think it enriches the story and makes it feel, if nothing else, very epic, very very epic with
Mm.
Yeah.
all the lore, right? So,
Um, if we're like coming to the end here, I just do have. Are we? You think?
I
Have we
think
touched
that
on all the?
I mean, we are never going to be able to cover every single element in here, but we've
Yeah.
done certainly at least the highlights. But give you guys an opportunity to bring up anything else before.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I do want to end on a little bit of a critical note, and like I say, I don't want to be this guy because but I have to be honest. I think when I spoke before about the great potential of Portal Fantasy being that you can bring a modern psychology into direct conflict or direct contact with the epic and the mythic and the romantic. I think it's also the great danger of Portal Fantasy, which is that by introducing the modern psychology, you really run the risk of breaking the immersion and making these things that come from these older traditions seem absurd at times. And I think that's part of the reason why uh, Tolkien does, as Donaldson says, divorce his work completely from reality because the immersion is never tested in the same way that you have in a Portal Fantasy. You're in the world the whole time, and you are Tolkien was a master, obviously, at world building and this kind of secondary belief in immersion. For me, like I said at the very beginning, my mileage varied on The Wandering Fire. And there were times where I wasn't fully invested in the story, like PL was saying, and it's super, super ambitious. And so, not all of the things he's trying to do landed with me. And sometimes, even though, and this is so important, even though we can explain theoretically and analyze what is happening and see how knowledgeable and how smart Kay is, it still doesn't matter if you're not taken there in the story, if you're not feeling the tingles like we've been talking about, if you're not moved to tears and having an emotional reaction to it. And there are times in this story where I was not fully invested, where I felt like things were overstuffed and I was taken out of the story. And as a point of comparison, in Tigana, I was invested from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that he can do that, and he will do that. For this series, at least for me, he's not quite there yet. And there is the sense of when you break the illusion even once or a couple times, it almost threatens to topple the whole thing because it takes that much more work to get you back into it. But I'm so excited to read the final book and to see what happens with all these characters and these themes we've been talking about. This is a special dude, this guy, Gavriel K. There's no question about that. We could not spend all this time analyzing stuff if he wasn't. If you read any interview with him, you can see that he knows his stuff. He really does. And so I am excited to see what's next.
Absolutely. PL, what would be your final?
Yeah, I just want to say that Evan basically he talked about tapestry. Evan I think pulled on the thread of the tapestry of the entire. I mean, what we talked about that whole conversation, especially surrounding do you need to know, the source material? Like I have to acknowledge, how clever and insightful Evan is here because this is the issue, right? So Kay takes these characters from legend and realize that when you take these characters from legend, again, with these preconceived notions about what's going to happen, what their arc's going to be, etc., they're characters that aren't his. Kay didn't create Arthur, he didn't create Guinevere, he didn't create the Knights of the Round Table, he didn't create that legend. That legend predates, that legend is centuries old in the making, right? Then you add his own characters, the Toronto Five, for all of these other characters, from Fionavar and beyond, the Dark Lord, his version of Dark Lord, his version of Elves, the Lyos, all this. So you have this really huge world connected to other worlds, and then you have Toronto as a portal, our world with Toronto Canada as a portal, you need to do a hell of a lot of bringing together.
It requires an extremely deft touch to pull all this off.
Yes, you nailed it, Evan. The touch you need, the adroitness, the adeptness you need to triangulate all these things in the last book is asking a lot of even the best, the Ericksons, the January, like you're asking a lot here, right?
Yeah.
In 3 books, you would expect that amount of triangulation, the amount of characters, the amount of things he's in a 7-book series. He's doing it in 3.
Yeah.
But I guess I just having read. I think I'm the one out of the 3 of us that's read the 3rd book. What I will say is this: I equate it to baseball, right? Baseball is a sport where if you hit the ball 30% of the time, you are one of the best hitters in the game, right? 30% of the time. And to the point where the feat of hitting it 40% of the time is so obscure and such an anomaly that only a couple people in the history of sports have done it. So realize that in it as much of that K may not hit even 30, 40% of what he's aiming to hit. The 30, 40% that he does, man, it's amazing. It's amazing. That's, I guess, my overarching comment that I hope you will take into the last book. That
I think it's well above 30 or 40.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
Like, but I take your point. But I take your point. Yes.
Yeah.
You can just read K for prose alone. I think he's one of those few rare authors that if you just want to be, I always want to read this beautiful passage. Like, this is amazing, and just like I just want to get lost in. Like, you can do that, right? There's books that you read for the action. There's books that you read. There's books where you read for even just the specific one thing that it does well is enough for you, right? Kay's trying to do a lot of things. He's in amongst that. He has amazing prose that will keep you going. Oh yeah, this guy can write. But the themes and the things he's aiming for, he's swinging over the fences, man, and it is a lot. But I think you will find again, and I think I said this in the first chat, that the whole, right? When you look at the whole, it's greater than the parts, and that when you read that last book, I think even the places where admittedly he doesn't meet the mark, it's still brilliant, man. It's still brilliant. He does so much well. He does more well than I as an author could ever hope to, you know what I mean? Like, he's just at another level, right? So I hope that you feel that way when you finish the series.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great analogy, PL, but I think this is also way more interesting than baseball. For me, at least. But I will say, and I said it in the first discussion, I think Portal Fantasy for adults is really challenging to pull off. And you add the fact that he's bringing in these archetypal elements into here, and you've got something that I'm astounded that this is working as well as it is. I'm astounded. I'd never have the ambition to write something like this. And I'm delighted that I'm enjoying it. And I'm very excited to see where he goes in the darkest road. But yeah, this is.
You're gonna cry. You're gonna cry. At least one scene. I knowing what little I don't know Evan as well. From what I know of Philip, the better. I think you both will still be emotionally impacted by that one scene of nothing else. Not just because of the sacrifice. I'm not spoiling things here. Obviously, there's gonna be more sacrifices, but the beauty with which the scene is written. I think it's a scene that you're going to read that scene over and over again.
Wow. Okay. I like that prediction. And let's not forget how young he was when he wrote this, too.
Yes. I think I was wrong, by the way, last time. I said he was 26. I think he was 30.
Okay.
But still. This one, I think he was, came out when he was 32. I just looked it up. But okay. Yes, I mean, but maybe that is the ambition of youth, and I appreciate that he's going there with it. Another thing too is that this question of immersion and whether it works for you is a subjective one, for those who it does work for completely, I salute that. As I said in the last video, I am very suspicious of my own judgment. And you should be. I think that's healthy, and I think that's a healthy thing to do.
It is healthy, but you have exceptional judgment and you have exceptional instinct. And I think the thing is, Evan, is like, I mean, I'll use my same example. The book I'm writing now, book 6 in the 7 book series, is so ambitious even for my ambitious series that even my wife, who, and my wife's she's like my first line of editing before I go to the professional edit and all that. And like, she was like, wow, this story's amazing. I love it. But people are going to read it and be like, what are you writing? They're going to be like, where are you going? What are you doing? What they may really invest in the story because it's so well written, but they're at first they'd be like, how, like, where are we? What are we doing? Where's it going? And I do get there, but because I think the story is good enough. But when you swing for the fences like Kay does, I have nowhere, and even I own of Kay's craft. But what I'm saying is, but when you go for it, like I said, even your misses are brilliant. And I think that when you guys finish, and I'll be tracking your progress carefully as you go through the GGK thing with all your other brilliant guests.
Excuse me, so
But
the GGK thing, it's the GGGKR. And
I'm sorry. It's right there. It's right there. The GGGKR.
We've trademarked it. We're selling merchandise. I mean, this is
Oh
a
yeah,
big deal.
yeah. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize. But what I do want to say is that when you're done, I would love to see in retrospect how you look back at this particular series compared to everything else you read, and whether or not just you see, okay, yes, the brilliance was there, it was in the deception, he just hadn't honed his craft it. But I'm just wondering how this is going to hold up versus, because I think I think this is going to stay with you. I think this series is going to stay with you, even amongst all the Taganas and all the seasons of the world, and like, I think this one is still going to stick with you.
I bet you're right. I bet you're right. Yeah. So, well, thank you both. This has been another fun discussion, and I'm convinced this is going to be so much fun going forward. And we will be meeting in approximately 1 month for The Darkest Road, the conclusion to the Fionavar tapestry. But in the meantime, that is it for us for now. Until next time.